Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Good News Conversations here on the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network. I'm your host, Good News reporter Gino Gutierrez, here with a special guest this week, the editor of the Albuquerque Journal and Vice President of News Operations, Patrick Ethridge. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited and incredibly fearful at the same time.
No need to be fearful, because obviously we are the Good News Podcast, so everything we're going to talk about is positive. I could have added an extra title to your name, though. You are really the mastermind of the Good News beat. This was all your idea, so I'm going to start off with the question I get asked all the time. Might as well pose it to the guy who came up with it. Where did the idea for this beat come from?
I love that we're having this conversation, even because a year ago I wasn't sure how this was going to go. So I got here 15 months ago, and right away, as I'm going around meeting as many people as I can, everybody says there's nothing good in the newspaper. The newspaper is just all bad news all the time. And I was used to hearing that because I've worked at newspapers since the 90s. But I started really kind of looking at the newspaper every day, obviously, and having more and more conversations and hearing that more and more. And it started to seem like it's kind of reality. We're putting all of these murders on the front page. We're putting all this corruption on the front page. And it was kind of slap in the face moment that, God, that's really true. And it's not fair to Albuquerque. It's not fair to New Mexico. So I really started realizing that I have a responsibility. We as the Journal have a responsibility to be more of a mirror of the community that we serve. And Albuquerque, everybody, you live here, you know this. It's not just violent crime. And I've never witnessed a murder. I've never witnessed a violent crime. There's a lot of great things that happen here. And that's really where it started. But then it took the right people, the right person to make that happen.
Yeah, and it's been a very interesting beat to cover because, to your point, every person I talk to that I've interviewed for stories or sources that I've talked to, they say the exact same thing. Before this beat started, there was never anything positive or dedicated to positivity about Albuquerque until this beat came along. And I know you've seen it firsthand as I have. It's really changed the way the readers view the newspaper.
I think so. I think, that the first day that we announced in the newspaper that we're doing this and Gino's going to do this, I think we had a couple dozen emails that first day. And it felt like it was really people calling our bluff. Like, oh, they're not really going to do this. Let me send them some ideas.
Yeah.
And now here we are. And you have more stories than you can get to still. But every week you've got 4, 5, 6 things in the paper and no shortage, to my knowledge, in the hopper, which, man, one, it shows that we really should have been doing this earlier, but it shows that there's a need for this, and it's just the right thing to do for a newspaper.
Yeah, and I know I've heard it from the community, but you seemingly come to me every single week with another person who has said, thank you so much for doing this. How do you feel personally that this beat has transformed the way people view the newspaper?
I could not be more proud. Coming up with the idea is one thing. That's easy. That's okay. Finding somebody, and this is really a tribute to you, that will dive in and that will find these stories, that will go to these events and actually care enough to ask some questions, care enough about getting the story told. That makes me feel so good. When I see somebody on and I see the podcast here or I see the story in the paper, and it's somebody who's committed their entire life to making New Mexico better in some way. I mean, it might be helping 1,000 kids learn how to fish over the course of years, or whatever it might be. It could be ice hockey. There's so many things. Even, running through the sprinklers at a park. Not every city does things like this. Not everyone puts the investment and the time into making the community better, and those people deserve for their stories to be told.
Yeah, and I know when you and I had the initial conversation when you first came to me with the idea of this beat, I know in my head I thought, wow, it's a really great idea. I wonder why no one's ever done that. But then came the part of actually applying the idea and getting out there and doing it. I know for me, I was when I first heard about it, my head started spinning with the idea of, what is this going to look like? How is this going to work? And then as the rollout happened, it kind of happened so quickly, you kind of let go of those ideas and kind of just went with the flow. But for you, I was curious, has the beat kind of lived out the way you kind of had envisioned it in your head?
I think it's turned out even better because not only has it shown that you can find these stories and people are bringing these stories to you, but I personally think that it's also kind of been contagious around the newsroom. Other reporters who maybe their entire career came up thinking, if my story doesn't have some kind of a crime angle or some kind of tragedy in it, it's not going to get play. And now I think we have other reporters seeing, I want to write some of those good news stories.
Yeah.
It's good for my soul. And next thing you know, we have other reporters who are contributing stories that way. And to me, there's no end in sight to that. And I don't think there will ever come a time when we don't want to do it.
No, because we're, like you mentioned, we're still getting emails every single day from people who, they want their stories told. They want these individuals highlighted. I know I've had a few personal favorite stories that I've covered so far, but I'm curious to pose the question to you. Is there any particular one that stands out that you go back to and you always reread, or one that's been a personal favorite?
Well, I'm going to kind of answer your question, kind of not.
Okay.
My
That's
personal favorite story related to good news is this. I hire a local kid to become a reporter at the Albuquerque Journal. I hire him to cover night and weekend crime in Albuquerque. Anyone who's familiar with Albuquerque knows covering crime, especially the night shift and the weekend shift in Albuquerque, pretty rough gig.
Yeah. This story sounds familiar.
So if you didn't know, this is Gino's story. Gino did that for a while, saw some really terrible things, and you came into my office and we had a talk, and man to man, you said, Patrick, I'm not sure this is the job for me. And it's not that you weren't capable of it. It's not that your stories were not good. It's not that you were doing anything wrong, but you had heart. And I'm so glad that you had the courage to come in and talk to me about it. I think a lot of reporters would have just walked away from the industry, would have just quit. You didn't do that. And then we talked, and then it was really clear after having a little bit more of a conversation with you that this is the beat you should have, because you care about people and you do have a heart and you do take this stuff serious and you don't let go of it. And not everyone is that way. A lot of journalists get kind of cynical over time and develop a really thick skin, and you care. And that's my favorite story.
Interesting. I wasn't what I was expecting, but I definitely can appreciate that. It has been definitely one of a great honor, an unexpected one, because as you mentioned, it wasn't initially what I was hired to cover, but I know for me as a local, the most impactful thing has just been sharing the stories of our community. And I've had these conversations before with other sources, with individuals I've talked to. The importance of being New Mexico's paper of record, and the importance of giving the full picture of the people that are here. That's the good and the bad. But the good that we've done so far, I feel, has really impacted the community in a lot of special ways. I'm curious for you how you feel going out every day. I'm sure you probably hear about it quite a bit.
I do, and it's great. I mean, a lot of times as the editor of the newspaper, you're going to walk into a room and you're going to hear a lot of complaints. And that's okay. That's part of the job, and you have grown accustomed to that over the years. What I'm not as used to, and thanks to you is happening more and more, is I'll walk into a room, I'll go to an event, and people will come up and thank me for sharing the good news. And that means a lot. That's a tribute to you. It's a tribute to the entire newspaper in my mind. And you're right. It's not that we're changing the narrative of New Mexico, because that's not our job. Our job is to be a reflection of the community we serve. And I think that the narrative we were giving before was not fair to Albuquerque. I think if you had been traveling and you stopped and you just looked at the newspaper for a week, you would think, oh my God, this is the Wild West. I need to get out of here. And I think now what we've done is pulled back the curtain so that you just get the full narrative. Yes, we have some crime issues. Yes, we have issues that any state or any city has, but we've also got some pretty great things going on.
Yeah, and here we are. We're approaching actually the 1-year anniversary of the Good News Beat. It'll be around end of September of next month. And the beat is still constantly evolving. I know just a couple weeks ago we introduced the new Good News Roundup, which has gotten a lot of positive fare with our readers. It's a great way for us to fit in all of those news stories that we couldn't quite get to throughout the week. And I'm kind of curious for you just how you feel like that rollout has been so far and what you've liked most about what you've read.
So I love the Roundup, and what I love about the Roundup is that we have so much good news going on that we have to do that because otherwise we couldn't ever get to them and we would find ourselves in a hole.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
The stories that are really special to me that you do are probably the ones that serve children. I grew up as a welfare kid, didn't have access to certain things, and I think any of those programs that give access, that give something to those children who are underprivileged and otherwise wouldn't, man, I would have loved some of those programs as a kid. And I just think that's a life changer. And those are the ones when I see the podcast or I read those, I usually read those 2 or 3 times. And I just think to myself what that would have meant to me. Mm-hmm. So what I know that it means to local kids.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. I haven't really thought that far ahead. I'm kind of just taking things day at a time because of the workload we've got. But where do you see the beat going from here? What do you envision it being? Let's say a year from now.
I don't want to say that there's anything you're doing now that needs to change. What I think will happen is we'll do more roundups. I wouldn't rule out the day that we have another good news reporter. Mm. I think if there's that many stories and there's that kind of support in the community for it, then, boy, I would love that.
Yeah, be fantastic. It also would be nice to have somebody else to kind of get the stories to that I can't quite get to. But, Patrick, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. I want to extend the message I've gotten from a ton of my sources, a ton of people I've spoken to for these stories, and say thank you for coming up with the idea for this Good News Beat. I see it on a daily basis. It's really made a difference for not only our readers, but for the people we get to highlight as well. It's made a huge difference for me as well. So thank you so much for coming up with this idea and being a fervent supporter of it and allowing us to pursue it.
You're very welcome. Honestly, the thanks falls to you because the idea doesn't mean anything without somebody like yourself to tell those stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.